Welcome to the Star Chamber. I'm Ryan Swayze, a retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel and the founder and president of the Walk the Talk Foundation, a nonprofit that advocates for and advises currently serving and former military service members going through the arduous journey of administrative processes and investigations in our government.
And I am Francescagraham, a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel and the Chief Operating Officer and Chief Advisor for the Walk the Talk Foundation. For all our returning guests, welcome back. And for our new listeners, thank you for tuning in. Before we begin this week's topic, please do not forget to hit that subscribe button, check out our Walk the Talk Foundation website, and hit that donate button if you think we're doing a good job. Also, check out our newsletter, the DoD Times Redacted, on all the socials, including LinkedIn, X, Instagram, and Facebook. Links in the description. All right, Star Chamber listeners, let's get started. Welcome back, Star Chamber listeners, to another great episode of the Star Chamber. Today we have the great honor to welcome one of our longest serving clients with the Walk the Talk Foundation, Michaella McFarland. She is a U.S. Coast Guard veteran whose career began with the Frederick C. Branch Leadership Scholarship Award through the Marine Corps and later included service with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, say that fast 3 times, and
NOAA.
The Coast Guard, NOAA. Rising from enlisted ranks to officer, she became a strong voice for reform, transparency, and survivor advocacy within the military. Her experiences navigating systemic challenges inspired her current work with the Mickey Foundation, which is just kind of awesome, where she focuses on strengthening peer support networks and promoting accountability across service communities. Michaella now channels that same resilience into endurance sports as she trains for her next Ironman. So have you already done an Ironman, Michaella?
Wow.
Hi, how are you? I have not done an Ironman. I've done mock ones, and unfortunately, I'm not very fast, but I put in a lot of effort. So we'll see how this goes.
Here's the thing, though, Michaella. It's kind of like when I did a marathon. Someone asked me what my time was, and then when it wasn't what they expected, they were just like, "Oh my God, why didn't you run faster?" If you do an Ironman, it doesn't matter how fast you've done an Ironman. Let's get real. Okay, back to the show.
Impressive.
It is pretty awesome, actually. We are going to do our quick disclaimer for all of our Poindexters in the group. Suck at Poindexters. We'll say that again at the end because I know Ryan.
It's like a right now and then
exactly.
after.
Yeah, exactly. Before and after. So the opinions and views expressed by guests on this podcast are solely their own and do not represent the official policies, positions, or endorsements of the United States Coast Guard or any other government entity. This discussion is intended for informational purposes only and should not be construed as reflecting the official stance of any military or governmental organization. So what do we say, Ryan? We'll just say it again.
Continue to suck it. Yeah.
Continue to suck at Poindexter. Yeah. So Michaella, with that, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on your wonderful podcast. I have been listening to all of the episodes religiously.
It's true.
And yes, I have all of the transcripts. So I'm happy to be able to have a conversation with you guys and be part of it. But as you stated, my journey started with the Marine Corps. I transitioned to work with NOAA and then over to the Coast Guard. And throughout all of that, there was a beautiful intersection of environmental response and human impact, which I really loved. All of the missions pertaining to protecting the people as well as their resources at the time. And so over time, I started to see how Coast Guard administrative systems could quietly fail the very people that they were designed to protect, which is how I met you guys when I tried to report misconduct and raise legitimate concerns. The focus shift from solving the problem to controlling the narrative. I filed official remedies in every capacity, including a redress, an Article 138 UCMJ complaint of wrongs, and equal opportunity employment. I filed with the Office of Inspector General, and even did a personnel record review board petition just to see if I could get any type of response. However, I was repeatedly met with no independence, no timelines, no accountability, and no response. And so in many of these cases, the same commands that had done these inappropriate actions that had been reported were allowed to investigate themselves, which
What?
is this like vicious
Unprecedented.
I mean, there's
cycle.
no conflict of interest there at all, I'm sure.
Oh my. Well, Michaela, thanks for coming on the show. You've been with us for literally years, so I've very much looked forward to this because we've really gotten to know each other, especially you and Francesca have really bonded over the last, 2 years almost, I think, at this point,
Almost,
if my plus or minus, if my math is right. And you got right into the nitty gritty, which is awesome, which is the snowball effect that so many cases reflect that we work with, including yours. It starts off as something that really should be pretty easily and straightforwardly addressed, right? It's some kind of wrongdoing, some kind of abuse, blah, blah, blah. And the person, the service member, whether it be Coast Guard or military, who's told, hey, we have all these avenues to address that, they do it. And then reality suddenly collides with the academic there. So tell us a little bit about that point, the events that led up to you going from a Coast Guard All-Star, which you were, to exploring, so to speak, all these avenues of redress.
The short nitty gritty point of it is that I had the beautiful opportunity to go to OCS. And then as soon as I completed OCS, or Officer Candidate School, I was shipped off to my first duty station. Within 3 months of being there, I got groped by one of the members there. And command didn't address it, didn't report it, didn't deal with it in any capacity. 3 months after that, one of the members on my team got assaulted by a foreign national, which resulted in a policy getting implemented only because I was adamant in talking to leadership over my current chain of command. So I went outside of them, which led to them obviously not being very happy with me. And in the pursuit to get answers for that person, dealing with the microaggressions in that environment, which just continued to build up. For example, I had various members of that department call me annoying, ugly, stupid. I found them going through my desk outside of work hours. And each of these incidences I would bring up to either my supervisor or their supervisor, asking them to acknowledge that there's a substantial issue happening and basically begging for culture training, any type of remediation, any type of acknowledgement, saying, hey, all of these people are doing creepy things. Please fix it because it can't continue to go on. Something is going to continue to escalate. And at that point, like, we had already been assaulted. So I'm like, what else can go wrong? What else could physically go wrong? And then it got to a point where one of the more senior person in the department was making comments specifically about women. And when I had asked administration to look into that, they didn't. And then they told me I was causing problems because I was asking them to acknowledge everyone else's actions. And then from there, they had launched an admin investigation into me, stating that despite being unqualified, I was causing issues on the vessels that I was inspecting by asking questions and being present, as well as the incidences that I had previously reported months ago were now being reported by the other members as something that I had done wrong, instead of my command believing me when I had reported them months earlier and addressing the issues then. So it was this weird snowball of issues that anything that they could like pluck out of thin air and blame on me was held to the maximum penalty it could be, instead of having a conversation or actually listening to me in the first place.
Yeah, so familiar pattern to a lot of cases, which is you see something wrong, whether it happens to you or another person. In your case, it was both. You do the right thing by reporting it to the entities you're told to report it to, and then suddenly you're targeted. And it's the spaghetti against the wall tactic, of course, throw whatever. You're unqualified, you're annoying. I don't think that breaks a rule. You're not annoying, though, but it doesn't break a rule. They throw everything at you, right, to see what sticks. And to say the control the narrative, that's how it begins. But so I'm going to go a little bit off script here because this fascinates me, Michaela, from a service perspective. So we see this in our military cases, and the vast majority of our walk the talk work is in the Department of Defense/War. But in the Coast Guard, this is what baffles me. So explain to the non-Coast Guardsmen here, you have this thing called fouled anchor going on, right? And really it was assault at the Coast Guard Academy, but it really has to do with the entire Coast Guard writ large, right? So that's going on while your case is playing out. So there is all this emphasis and attention, allegedly, on nipping all this in the bud, curbing sexual assault, sexual harassment in the Coast Guard, and by extension in the military also. And now you see this play out where you know someone's assaulted, you're harassed, and you collide with this very ingrained Coast Guard culture, which is incentivized seemingly to keep it under wraps or to muzzle the complainant, the whistleblower. What happened in your unit? What do you think is happening in the Coast Guard still today that caused, I'm sure, a reaction that a lot of other complainants like you see and saw?
So to answer your questions, there's a few points. Operation Fouled Anchor was from the 80s until 2006. The first official report, its investigation came out in 2023. I was actually very lucky to be one of the first people to read that report and present it out to all of California senior leadership in the Coast Guard, which was amazing. It was a 4-hour brief, super educational. It's online somewhere. But occurring within the Coast Guard, these assaults and harassments, in light of Operation Fouled Anchor, the Coast Guard can either act on it or they can squash it. Now, if the Coast Guard acts on it, they have to admit that something's wrong. And they're not going to do that because then the commanding officer of whatever institution that has an assault or harassment case gets a negative ping on their record saying that something happened under their command and they didn't have good leadership skills or enough workplace culture demonstrations in order to address these issues at the start, right? So that could be an issue. Or they could say, hey, I know the person that's being accused. They would never do that. And that's one of the cases that I had to deal with personally. I had this person that was repeatedly making comments towards me, making advances. I reported it. It got up to command. Command had basically called and said, nope, I know this person. They would never do that. You're taking it wrong. So sorry. It is what it is. And then there was no solution. And then from there, there's just isolation on the person who reported it and the gaslighting. And the gaslighting is one of those main things that the Coast Guard does to isolate people and make them feel like it's all of their fault.
And I think, Michaella, it would also be interesting for our listeners, specific to the Coast Guard and specific to where you were. One of the junior member that you reported to your leadership that she was sexually assaulted. One of the reasons, if I recall from our conversations, that your command did not want to pursue that allegation of sexual assault by the third country national, in addition to their saying that having her breasts groped was not touched enough to actually be sexual assault. That was, if I recall, the O3's determination. In addition to that, one of their other logic for that is that the Coast Guard for that base is responsible for a huge amount of commercial traffic. And if there is any sort of negative personalities with the Coast Guard base plus the third country nationals, that could impact commercially the bottom line of the United States. And so they were concerned about money loss and did not want to have any reputational issues.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was the response from command. One of them was that that individual wasn't touched enough in order for it to be considered assault, which is completely inappropriate. Absolutely. This poor person.
Two touchings is okay, but after that, boy, no. Oh my God.
It was awful. One of the things I literally heard while I was there, around the corner, of course, walking around, you're doing your duties, you're getting all of your sign-offs to get qualified. Heard command say about one of the people that I had reported, he didn't say that. And if he did, he didn't mean it. And if he did, you didn't understand what he was saying. And if you did, it was no big deal. And if it is a big deal, others have said worse.
All right. Just making up the law as we go. Pew, pew. I love it.
Yeah, I think that single quote captures the whole culture program, the instinct to minimize, to protect rank over truth. That's why reform can't just be procedural. It has to be a culture because if you normalize denial, you criminalize honesty. And so anyone who
Hmm.
comes forward is immediately squashed and reinvestigated themselves. Where if it's an admin investigation, there's no rebuttal, there's no appeal, there's no legal guidance. It's whatever they say it is, which I don't even know how that's legal, but
Interesting. So it starts with the value system. And we see this also in the military. Like you can put up all the core value posters in the world that you want, but at the end of the day, people within the armed services, being human beings, are just going to do what's incentivized and rewarded. It's interesting that you said, like, you are dissuaded as a commander from reporting, investigating, quote unquote, admitting you've got a problem when these allegations come forward. And that's why they're prone to squashing the complainant or the allegation versus actually delving into the abuse or the wrongdoing. Yeah.
yeah, I actually have a really good example of, despite the fact that there had been ongoing issues even before the time I got there, there was a culture investigation because of how toxic it was, because so many junior officers walked out in traffic. Despite the fact that that happened, the command still didn't put up security cameras to track all of these incidences. And so at some point, when we had a break, holiday routine or Christmas break, they had found a cut up rainbow flag on someone else's desk, basically a hate crime, saying, "Hey, I know this person's gay. I'm going to cut up their flag to show how much I hate them. We don't want them around." But since there were no cameras, you couldn't prove anything happened. So the commander at the time, the commanding officer at the time, came out and said, "Hey, we had a hate crime. We know it happened. We're acknowledging that it happened, but since there's no one responsible, there's really nothing else we can do." And that was it.
Yeah. Okay. So that explains that. So we're going to kind of catch us back up on the timeline here. So you've entered into the Coast Guard. Your first duty station is LA. You almost immediately run into these issues, the cultural issues that surely existed before you arrived. You say, hey, this is wrong. I'm going to report this. I'm going to address it. I'm going to confront it. You get squashed. So you've been with us working since June of 24, so a better part of 2 years. And Michaella, one of the many reasons I'm glad you're on the show is because you really do serve as an example for a lot of others. And specifically, you show that the people that I think achieve the most success and have the most agency in this process are those who are persistent and they have the grit. This is, for better or for worse, these admin processes, these investigations, Inspector General, Equal Opportunity, Article 138, etc., they go on for quite some time. They're a grind, and they're a grind by design. And the government outweights and slow rolls people to outgrind them so that the individual will just give up. And the vast majority of the time, I think that's happening unless you've got backup, which is the niche we fill. But you've shown yourself to be quite the persistent Coast Guardsman in this, having exhausted just about every avenue of redress under the sun. So we're going to fast forward a little bit. So you and Francesca work. I mean, you have done it all in these last 2 years. You've gone to Congress, you've gone to the press, you've gone within the chain of command, you've gone outside the chain of command within the service, etc. And seemingly every time you're met with the same old song and dance, which is, we're either not going to talk to you, so thanks Coast Guard leadership, you cowards, for just giving her the stiff arm. She was just looking for redress. And feel free to name names, by the way, because it's not libelous or slanderous if it's true. So the coward leadership of the Coast Guard who just ignored you, and then they wonder why these problems in the service persist. Oh, gee, I wonder what's going on. So you've exhausted so many avenues of redress. So catch us up to speed. You go through all of that, and in essence, you get more of the same everywhere you go, with a few exceptions, and there are a few very engaged members of Congress and some other advocates. But ultimately, the Coast Guard, just like we see in these other cases in the military, it's more important for them to be right and save face than it is to retain talent or seek justice or see justice through, etc. And your case was no exception in that. So in the end, what ends up happening through all this rigmarole?
Perfect. Thanks for that question. I just want to say, one, I absolutely agree with you. I think they're a bunch of cowards. The fact that a majority of the negative paperwork that was issued was done with less than a week of each of the person issuing that paperwork's retirement and or quitting speaks enough for itself, that they're going to issue negative paperwork about someone else and then turn around and quit so they don't have to be held responsible. But I would say what happens next, or how would fairness look like if you could redesign the system? And it's one that I've thought about a lot, because what I went through isn't rare. It's just rarely talked about because of all of the gaslighting that these poor people go through. So I would say first, we need independence. You can't have the same chain of command investigating itself and expect trust.
Amen.
Investigations should be handled outside of the immediate unit, preferably by a trained civilian or joint service oversight team.
Yes.
That's one of the main issues that we have in any type of quote unquote investigation, is that they're randomly assigned to a person. There's no experience, there's no training, there's barely any guidelines. The only guidelines I was able to find were from 2015. It was a random PowerPoint. And so any type of training would be great. Secondly, we need transparency. So written status updates. I know that the OIG is the only one that has to provide 6-month status updates. But even then, they can say the same thing every 6 months until they're completed their investigation. So written status updates.
Which can go on for a decade.
Mine's on 3 years and I got nothing.
Yeah. Yep. And that's legal, right? By letter of the law. Yeah. Okay. Continue.
And then reasonable timelines. So silence isn't neutrality. It's corrosive. If people know where their cases stand, they can function again. Thirdly, we need training and certification for investigators and victim advocates, as well as mental health professionals. So in my next role here as a member of the Mikey Foundation, where we are anti-suicide advocates, we are developing the training and the certifications for our own program to then go out and train members of the Coast Guard. So that way they themselves can have that training, but also when they get out, if they come in contact with that loneliness or any of these processes that make them feel isolated or gaslit, they know how to help themselves and to help others. We want to be able to handle trauma and not just deal with whatever the system has given us. And so
That's
finally,
so well said.
There needs to be a way to pause the punitive action while oversight's ongoing. Otherwise, you're just punishing people before facts are verified, which is wild, but all right. And none of this is radical, right? This is just functional. So the truth is, fairness doesn't weaken the military, it strengthens it, because the members trust the process. They stop protecting themselves, they start protecting the mission again. And that's why I say fair process is readiness.
I had a tear in my eye as you were answering that question, because it's so many things that we've addressed time and time again, whether it be in legislation or executive orders or meetings with higher level officials in the Department of Defense, Inspector General system. You hit it all: the independence, the training, the oversight, the mental health impacts of these kangaroo courts. I look forward to you working with us, Michaella, in the future in the foundation and advocating for reform, because you've seen it all and you've got all the solutions. Now it's just a matter of, it's twofold, right? It's the legal part, but it's the cultural part, like you said. Like, you can have all the legislation in the world, but at the end of the day, if a captain of a base is rewarded for having no sexual harassment complaints, the legislation is null and void. It's stupid. It's ridiculous, right? It's worthless. So it's a two-phase approach. So, all right. So you have learned all these lessons now, which I applaud you, because I agree 1,000,000,000% with all your points. Unfortunately, and I'm going to kind of spoil the end here, in the end, you aren't retained by the Coast Guard. Talk to me through what victory now looks like for you. So your service is now behind you. You fought a glorious and valiant battle, both of you. I'm looking at Francesca and Michaella, but now you're out. So how do you serve? Because I know you, and I know you want to serve and pay it forward. What does winning look like for Michaella McFarland now post-service?
I would say, thank you for your question. I would say what winning looks like post service is just continuing to be a great leader outside of the Coast Guard, right? So continuing to be empathetic and embracing a different perspective. And those two traits are so often forgotten about because leaders get so focused on their position that they forget their purpose, right? And the real job of a leader isn't about being in charge, it's about taking care of those in your charge. And if every commander lived by that, we'd see immediate change because empathy doesn't make you weak, it makes you accurate, right? When you understand what your people are living through, your decisions get sharper, not softer. And so, in addition to like that cultural reset, moving forward, embracing all of those values, I am very, very lucky that I got to get scouted basically by the Mikey Foundation, who is this anti suicide corporation that specifically is building these training programs with empathy and perspective to then go back and train the Coast Guard as well as the DoD personnel. That way we can build just a better foundation for people in general. And I think one of our CEOs, Mr. Mealy, just got an award from the Pentagon for his outstanding service. And so we're slowly getting up there, which I absolutely love and appreciate. And we have a 24-hour hotline in case anyone is feeling some type of spicy way where if they actually need to reach out to a specific person, they can get a hold of someone immediately instead of calling 988, which the last time I called, as an example, it took 30 minutes to talk to a person. And so our goal is to actually have that one-on-one communication and presence available. So moving forward, absolutely ecstatic to work with the Mikey Foundation, continuing training for Ironmans, just so I can maintain that wonderful endurance that the Coast Guard has trained into me through all of that. But that's all I can think of.
I love it. It's interesting. So, one of the key elements of our work at the foundation and our work with our clients is definitions of victory. And when we first start work with somebody and we have an initial consult, we ask, okay, what does victory, what's success look like for you in this instance? And a lot of times it morphs, right? It starts out as one thing and then it ends up being another thing. And I think your case is no exception. Like you start off like, I want redress, recourse, etc. And now you're looking forward to the future and seeing how you can help others. So can you talk to me briefly, and this is really a message for everybody going through casework, how that story played out for you, how you said, okay, my objective is this. And then you said, okay, well, I'm not going to achieve it or it's not tenable. So I have to go look now for this is now success. Kind of talk me through that kind of metamorphosis, if you will.
Yeah, of course. I think for me, I personally have to pursue every avenue until I can't anymore. And so I historically say, you can only say no to me so many times before I get a yes. And every time I get a yes, it's just a way to get a solution to be able to work anything out. But unfortunately, the Coast Guard continued to say no. And so in that perspective, I was able to just accept that I had pursued everything that I could and thank the Coast Guard for the opportunity to be able to serve and to grow and to learn whatever I could from them. And I've learned so much from them. And in my acceptance of that and the fact that I still am a leader like each of us are in our own way, I wanted to be more on a one-on-one basis with people, especially because a lot of those people that I had interactions with while I was stationed at LA, amidst the horrors and the tango that I had with malevolent people on a daily basis, a lot of them are suicidal. A lot of those junior officers are suicidal. I would get numerous phone calls. I had to walk people down for a mental health hold numerous times, which is when you're in that clinic for 72 hours. And then leadership would be so upset because that person couldn't do their operational job for the time that they're in that mental health hold that it really showed how they don't care. They don't care about the person. They care about operations, which doesn't make much sense because your people, where your people are, who they are, how they are, drives those operations and missions. And so taking in light all of that, all of my experiences, really knowing that I pursued every avenue that I could. And I really want to focus on the people side of it. I was scouted by the Mikey Foundation to work with them to build a training program to be able to get people the help that they needed to. And so in all of the tangos that I had and all the interactions that I had, accepting that and just not letting the ugliness in others destroy the beauty that's inside of me is what I just decided to focus on instead. And so I chose integrity over fear. And I tried to just make the system a little better for each individual person. And whether that person is in the Coast Guard, a spouse, in the DoD, or a family member that knows them, every single person is so important that the goal is to just be heard, seen, and understood, to just have a better, I want to say unit, but obviously I've been in the military for too long, to have a better cohesive relationship. And that's all that really matters, right? Like our time here is so fleeting that like the only currency you really have is time. And the only thing you want to do with your time is to just be kind in general, because what else are you going to do? Like that's what you should do, man.
That's really well said, McKay. Very inspirational words, I have to say. And one of the things that struck me as you were talking is that I think you have maintained your semblance of wholeness and health and wellness for many reasons, but one of them is because you defined and continuously redefined victory based on what you could do. And one of the traps we see with other people that we work with is they define victory or success based on if something else happens to another entity or another person, something they don't have any control within, right? It's like, well, I want to see accountability. Well, you may or may not have control of that. I want to see them fired. You don't have control of that. I want to see this that you don't, is not within your sphere of control. And that's what we try and shape of the foundation. You've done incredibly well, and you articulated it also very well, is look, you just do as much as you can do. You just take as much agency and control as you can, and the rest has to be left up to fate and or the work of the foundation, right? I think it's so inspirational. You set such a good example for others to follow who are going through this now after you to follow, which is you may not quote unquote win your IG complaint. You may not have a successful quote unquote equal opportunity complaint, but you can still win in your career and life, right? And that's the overarching thing we're trying to do here at the foundation, aside from the nitty gritty of the bureaucratic work, which is important, is that to take that person, give them agency and say, hey, I won, I lost, I drew, whatever. But at the end of the day, I came out on top, and you definitely have. Now I'm going to pivot to Cheska because she's been tied at the hip with you throughout all this and has seen it. And I'm going to ask her highlight and low light from her 18-ish, we'll call it, month battle with the United States Coast Guard and Department of Homeland Security. What did you see, Cheska, that really gave you pause for concern? Something maybe unique to the Coast Guard / DHS that you haven't seen in the military side of the house? And what, whether it be process-wise or Michaella-wise, that did you witness that really gave you a source for hope and inspiration?
Well, thank you, Ryan. I think it's perfect caveat because I was about to jump in and give a couple of small vignettes of Michaella's experience over the last several years, just to give the listeners a little bit of an idea of, from these two vignettes, an idea of the moral injury that she suffered while she was in the Coast Guard. One of the vignettes is that she was found guilty of making a false official statement. And the false official statement that they referenced for this Article 107 violation, that she had no opportunity to rebut, by the way, derived from a statement, a verbal statement she had given to an investigating officer for the administrative investigation against her. And when she asked for a copy of that verbal statement to make sure that, after the IO had transcribed it, to make sure the IO had transcribed it correctly and that captured her words correctly, whatnot, not only did the investigating officer refuse to give her a copy, but the staff judge advocate also refused to give her a copy. She asked 3 times for a copy of her statement.
Nice.
And
Oh,
then
that's
her statement
classy.
was included in the record. And then as a result of her statement, which she did not have an opportunity to validate or view, she was found guilty of Article 107, false official statement. And the
Oh,
other
brilliant.
Brilliant. And the other short vignette is that Michaela made an allegation of sexual harassment against a civilian of an organization that works regularly with the Coast Guard. And she told her O4, Lieutenant Commander boss, about it. And his response was to direct her to apologize to the person that she alleged sexually harassed her, to give him an apology because her making an allegation that he had sexually harassed her could damage the relationship of the two organizations. So he directed her to apologize to him. And so
The
that's
very
just
definition of gaslighting. The very definition. Open the dictionary. There's a picture of that
right.
email.
And so
Nice.
those are
Well
two
played, Coast Guard.
right. And so those are we really didn't get into the nitty-gritty of the case, which we didn't want to in a way, because you could just go down so many, I called it rabbit holes of rage. But I wanted to give the listeners just very two small vignettes to be just like the utter amount of insanity that Michaela has dealt with over the last several years, and example of her current resiliency, and also how awesome and courageous she is for, even despite that moral injury, helping others with their moral injury from different services. So specific to, and forgive me, Ryan, for the preamble, but specific to the concern that the low light of advising Michaela. The low light was when Michaela submitted an Article 138, which is a request for redress to her commander. And her commander, Captain Creasy, Stacy Creasy, her response was, "I cannot help you in any way, shape, or form."
Coward.
We came back and we said, well, no, the Coast Guard regulations specifically say the commander has the authority to help you to do these things, to pull these documents from your record, et cetera, et cetera. It specifically says the commander has the authority to do it. And Captain Creasy's staff judge,
Not to mention, it's a basic, fundamental foundation of leadership. If a subordinate reaches out and said, "I need help,"
right.
I mean, who in their right mind, in any command capacity, would go, "Sorry, I can't help you"?
Right.
I mean, that's just despicable.
Exactly.
How embarrassing.
Right. It's utterly pathetic. And the logic for the response, and this is not unique to the Coast Guard, the logic for the response is, well, there's an administrative process to handle that. You can do the PRRB, or you can do the personal record, blah, 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 whatever brief. It's basically these years-long opaque, no due process, et cetera, processes that places the entire burden on the member instead of the commander.
Yeah, it's
correct.
deflect.
It's deflect instead of the commander doing the things that the regulation specifically says they can do. And that was a definite low light. That's actually, if anybody recalls the podcast that we did that talked about abusers versus eunuchs, it was from that experience that I first had the idea of a eunuchy person.
Yeah. And that's an 06, right? I mean,
06.
That's a
Yep.
seasoned officer who has enjoyed success in the system by inaction.
Correct.
Right. And we talk about culture. So it's not completely on her, although it is mostly on her. It's also a culture thing, because that's what's incentivized and rewarded. Right. She's not incentivized and rewarded by making bold action and taking decisive decision. She's incentivized by letting a judge advocate deflect any real questions, accountability, culpability, and just go, "Sorry, you lose."
Correct.
Awesome.
And of course, when we went through with the Article 138 up to her flag officer level, the Admiral JAG, concurred violently with the 06 JAG, Judge Advocate, Staff Judge Advocate, and likewise took a eunuchy response of, "I am Admiral Buzella, and though I am a 2-star and I can do things, I am not going to do things.
I am a waste of space in general.
I am not going to do things because why would a 2-star get paid to do things?" Why, we ask why, Admiral Bozella. And then the highlight, I would say, does not actually come from the Coast Guard itself. The highlight comes from Michaela.
To no one's surprise.
To no one's surprise. The highlight is actually Michaela, who, although you did not hear it on this podcast, because Michaela is a consummate professional, Michaela is spicy and she is aggressive, and she is
That's why we love her.
right. This is why this is a highlight. And I thought that I had the ability to craft a sentence with as many adjectives as possible. And Michaela surpassed me on numerous times, and it just warmed my heart every single time. It was almost like a top spinning. It's like, there it goes, we're going. And every single time it completely warmed my heart. And then really, like Ryan said, and also Michaela, like you said, if there was another thing to possibly do, another avenue to possibly take, you were just like, let's do it, let's go. And that's really, really commendable and really awesome.
It's inspiring, yeah. And Michaela, you've seen it now in spades, as do everyone that's going through these processes, which is the institution is going to try and crush you. They're going to isolate you. Your friends, your battle buddies, whatever they're called in the Coast Guard, shipmates, I don't know. Don't answer that. You become radioactive because they don't want to, here's a Coast Guard pun, they don't want to go down with the ship, right? The institution is going to take you down and they don't want to go down with it. And there's risk, and I get it from a cost-benefit standpoint. So you're isolated and you're alone, and then you get the vast resources of the military or Coast Guard postured against you to just outgrind you. But you did not succumb to that. And that's why your story is so inspiring. And really, sorry for going off script heinously here, but when you started talking, it really jogged a lot of memories from this case and really spurred the takeaway for everybody. And because a lot of the shows we do is kind of the same pattern of behavior from the institution. But what makes your case, I think, unique is how you took the fight to them and you refused to give up. And even though perhaps you didn't win a traditional victory, look at you now inspiring others as well as helping and paying it forward. So that's why it's such an awesome, I think, happy, quote unquote, ending for so many reasons. So with that, I leave Michaela, you the last word.
Perfect. Thank you. I didn't know I get the last word. Thank you for all of your help and for allowing the opportunity to come on. And I think the last thing I'll say is don't mistake silence for strength and don't mistake complacency for loyalty.
Good words. I like that takeaway. It's very poignant. Jessica, anything to add?
Nothing to add. Michaela, we really appreciate you coming on the show.
Yes,
and
outstanding
all of
show.
our loyal listeners. See you next time.
Next time. Bye.
Bye. Well, that's it for this week's topic. We really appreciate you tuning in. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and check out our foundation website at walkthetalkfoundation.org.
And feel free to reach out and give us feedback. You can get a hold of us via Facebook, X, Instagram, LinkedIn, and our foundation's website. Details in the description section. Thanks for tuning in, and see you next episode.